Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me once again today, and welcome to Basic Nation Analysis. Today we're taking a look at early age Niefelheim, one of the giant nations, in fact possibly the prototypical giant nation. They're among the biggest, they're one of the first, and they're the giantest in terms of how they play. Now, if you take a look at my territory, it's turn 12. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, I think I missed one. I think it's like 1 second. We can look at this. We can make sure of this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24 provinces. 24 provinces in 12 turns, not too shabby. Now, this is not the fastest I could have expanded, and this is of course done with out AI interference, because I found that doing this with AIs, a lot of AIs on the map, it just becomes extremely frustrating very, very quickly, because random shit will happen to you, which is realistic, but it makes it difficult to get what I would consider typical expansion, which is what I want to show off in these videos. I want to show off typical expansion. Now, this is, as I said, this is a little bit atypical. This is a little bit further than I would anticipate expanding as Nifflheim in year 0, but not much. Getting 20 provinces as Nifflheim, I would say, probably should. Definitely doable. Now, the reason why is because Nifflheim has units that are fantastic at expansion. They're not actually great at fighting other players, but they're fantastic at expansion. So let's talk about the early game part of Nifflheim first. Nifflheim is a nation of giants. All of their units are size 4. They literally don't have any size 3 or lower units. They have a lot of sacreds, but their troop sacreds are actually not very good. The Niffle giants, they're very large, they're size 5, they have lots of hit points, they have good stats, but they're size 5. Also, they're susceptible to fire. Now, they have a chill aura, which is a bless, so they effectively have the chill aura bless for free. They also have cold power and ice protection. Unfortunately, both of these also work backwards, so in Cold 3, Niffle Giants are very dangerous. In Cold 3, they have Prot 21, their attack skill is 15, their defense skill is 15, their strength is 28, they become very scary in Cold 3. And their chill aura, of course, is more powerful in the cold, so they freeze people around them very, very rapidly. However, as I said, they're susceptible to fire, which means if set on fire, they will continue to burn for a long-ass time, and burn to death if you're not careful. And their attack density is very low, and their attack skill, honestly, is not amazing. When you have one attack coming out of a square, the fact that it's only attack skill 12 means that it's just going to miss and not accomplish anything much of the time. So Niffle Giants look very intimidating, but they're not actually very intimidating to a player, and that's because players can execute countermeasures. So, for example, if you're playing against an Olmish player, Olmish troops have cold resistance 5, which means that they almost ignore the chill aura entirely. They have high attack density and they have high damage, so Olmish infantry will swarm Niffle Giants and cut them to ribbons. The same is true of a lot of size 2 infantry. Any size 2 unit with multiple attacks will rip Niffle Giants to shreds if you're not very careful. That said, there is one thing that Niffle Giants do very, very well. They take a regeneration bless very, very well, because they regenerate 7 hit points a turn. So Niffle Giants with just a regeneration bless, nothing else, can expand extremely well, because in combination with a small group of other troops, the Niffle Giants get blessed. They march forward in the middle of all these other giants. The giants all have cold resistance, so they are not hit by the chill aura effect, but independents are. And so the Niffle Giants walk forward, they stand in the middle of the independents, slowly hitting them one at a time. You can see this guy's got 38 kills, because he slowly hits people one at a time. They freeze, gain fatigue, stop being able to defend themselves, and the Niffle Giant chops them one by one, while, meanwhile, the other Yotan units around him also hit them. So that's the way that Niffle Giants can expand. The other way that Niffleheim can expand very rapidly is they have access to Yotan Skin Shifters. Yotan Skin Shifters are very expensive in gold, but cost almost no resources. They have a high damage attack, and they regenerate, and when killed, they turn into a wolf, which is almost the same stat-wise, but it has higher protection and 2 attacks. So when they turn into a giant wolf, they actually become a lot more powerful. So for example, you can see this turn I took 4 provinces in turn 12. And unless I run into a hard opponent, I'm not going to stop. So this is an easy enemy province. It does have a Cloud Mage in it, but he's just level 1. And you can see over here, this is a basic Yotan expansion party. I've got a couple of Niffle Giants with the Regeneration Bless, and for the Chill Aura, I've got a few Yotan Skin Shifters, and then I've got 1 or 2 random other troops just to soak hits. And they charge forward. They start fighting. The enemy racks up fatigue very quickly for being in the Cold Aura when they're near the Niffle Giants, and they get killed by the very hard-hitting attacks. So you can see here real quick, 82 fatigue on this archer just for standing next to my Niffle Giant for a couple of rounds. This one is actually already frozen. And that fatigue, of course, inflicts hidden attack and defense penalties on them, which makes it harder for them to accomplish anything. So they just get massacred very, very quickly. We can also look at, where's a slightly more complicated one? I'm looking for one to see if one of my skin shifters was actually forced to change form. There are no skin shifters in this battle. Second forest. Yes, I actually lost a skin shifter here. Okay, so attacking into the second forest. How did I lose a skin shifter here? Was one of my skin shifters terribly wounded? So if we're fighting, regeneration is happening. Okay, there, yeah, so he turned into a wolf. He's badly injured, he's weakened and limp and battle fright and all of that, but wolves have slightly higher protection because it's natural protection, better attack skill, and 2 attacks which do quite high damage, as well as more hit points, so they actually regenerate more. So skin shifters can expand with very little attrition, because they're just very difficult to kill, like super difficult to kill. And it works out really well. Now, of course, this is expensive, but you can do it very quickly and build up a lot of income. So right now, because it's expensive, you get off to a slow start. But so I only have 1 palisade completed at turn 12, which is slow. I should have started the palisade earlier. But I've got that one completed, that one's in progress, there's one up here in progress, and there's going to be one over here in progress, because now that I've expanded like this, my income is actually quite high compared to my upkeep. Now, I have not recruited many mages, only a couple, and then I have a couple more out site searching, and getting ready to build labs for my forts. So I'm behind in the research game, but not irreparably. I'm at 58 research points on turn 12, which is not terrible. And with all this territory, I can kind of consolidate, take the time to build up a mage corps, and attack somebody, which is what you want to be doing pretty quickly. Now, speaking of mages, Niffleheim's mages are very interesting. They're all expensive. They only have 3 mages. They're all expensive. 2 of them are slow to recruit, and 1 of them is capital only. But they're all extremely powerful. The first is the Yotan Skratti, and the Yotan Skratti is probably the single most defining mage of the Jotunheim line. All of the Niefelheim, Jotunheim, Utgard line. All of the nations of the line... Well, actually, I think Utgard... No, Utgard, I think, still has access to Skratti. Skratti are, essentially, God's perfect communion slaves. Why? Because they're giants, so they have high hit points. They can take a regeneration bless because the nation Niffleheim has astral, so you can forge shrouds of the battle saint, which give them your regeneration bless. They shape change into Yotan Werewolves, which have regeneration natively and have more hit points. And on top of that, since you have nature, you can forge them if you want rings of regeneration, or you can give them coral blades because you have water to increase their hit points. So the result is you can have a Yotan Skratti regenerating 10 or 15 hit points a round pretty easily. And what that means is, because of the way communion math works, they can effectively support 10 or 12 communion masters, in this case Gygjas, indefinitely. So, because you have blood, they can enter a Sabbath, which is the same as a communion. It's the same mechanism. The randoms really don't matter for this. But you can have 2 Yotan Skratti supporting 10 Gygjas indefinitely. And those 10 Gygjas can just be shitting out spells constantly, and the Yotan Skrattis will be taking damage because they'll be over 200 fatigue, and regenerating the damage, and not actually dying. And if you do that carefully, if you balance it well enough, these turbocommunions can just enable you to crank out spells like mad, while boosting your Gygjas so they are Death 2 or 3, or Nature 3, or Blood, or Astral, or what have you. You can just boost them up. You can use Force Skratti if you want a higher path boost. You can use, Light of the Northern Star or Power of the Spheres on your Gygjas to boost them up. all that stuff. You can form incredibly potent communions with these guys. Also, Yotan Skratti are amazing thug chassis, because once again, they have the natural regeneration, and their werewolf form has full slots. So it can carry, like the Buddhas, who have the were-hyenas form with full slots, but bigger and tougher and with better stats, Yotan Skratti can carry gear, and you have the paths, as Jotunheim, to forge a lot of fantastic thug gear very easily. Frost brands, vine shields, flesh eaters, dusk daggers if you need to kill enemy supercombatants or enemy thugs. All kinds of great stuff is available. Hearts of life, the boots of quickness, all kinds of stuff. Yotan Skratti have a wide variety of thug gear available to them, and they have a lot of thugging potential. So Skratti are amazing thugs. They're also amazing communion slaves to form turbocommunions. Gygjas are amazing communion masters. Now, Gygjas are old, and they're expensive. They're 225 gold. But, well, okay, let me take that back. Let me back up. They're expensive in raw terms. They are not expensive for what they do. They're actually really cheap for what they do. 225 gold gets you 5 paths, which is good path value, and they're all sorcery paths. They're all really high value paths. There's no wasted magic here. You get death, nature, and blood, and you have the potential to have astral randoms as well. All of this is incredibly powerful stuff. This is all magic that, especially in the context of a turbo communion, you can turn into really, really powerful effects. You can turn into Skelospam, you can turn into castings of Swarm, or battlefield-wide nature buffs. I mean, hell, you can stack mass regeneration on top of all the regeneration you already have to make your giants regenerate while they regenerate. You can rack up to high-level blood and cast, bloodletting or similar battlefield-wide spells. Rush of Strength to give all your summons and such more power. You can rank up to high-level death and cast darkness. As you Skelospam, you can cast Rigor Mortis in the communion pretty easily. There's a lot of things you can do. Your final mage is the Niefelheim, and the Niefelheim is one of the most expensive mages in the game, 525 gold. The Niefelheim is a very powerful supercombatant chassis, somewhat hampered by paths. So the Niefelheim has cold power, ice protection, high level of ice protection. And, the chill aura and the cold resistance. He is susceptible to fire. He's sacred, priest level 2, water and death paths with the potential to random air. These aren't perfect supercombatant paths, but they're pretty decent. Water enables him to quicken himself and cast liquid body. Death enables him to cast soul vortex, which is a very good supercombatant path, and skeletal body, which makes him pierce resistant if you don't want to cast liquid body and take the speed penalty. Water and death enables him to cast Stygian Skin, which gives him higher nat prot, which gives him invulnerability. Doesn't work against magical weapons, of course, but, there's always downsides to things. And, of course, since he starts with high water, he can spam water elementals very effectively if you want to. That said, the Niefelheim does have distinct weaknesses that make him not exactly the perfect supercombatant chassis. For one thing, the fire weakness, that is a problem, and since you don't have any fire, it's actually somewhat difficult to fix. The best you can do is, I think there's a water spell that gives you fire resistance that you can use to cancel that out, but stacking up a lot of fire resistance is going to be somewhat challenging for Niefelheim. I don't think there are any water items that give you fire resistance, although I'm just thinking that off the top of my head. I can't prove it. But most fire resistance items require actual fire. If you want to use Niefelheim as supercombatants, which is a very reasonable thing to do, then you may want to expand your bless a little bit. So I took an Irminsul, and I took just Nature 7. Just strictly regeneration bless. And I did this because it enables me to get really good scales for Nifflheim. Nifflheim wants really good scales because their research is inefficient. Gygjas, while cheap for the paths they produce, are expensive for the research they produce. Skratti are awful for research because they're slow to recruit. And of course Niefelheim are, well, So your research is slow, so you want to have magic scales. You need to have growth scales because you're a blood nation, because Gygjas have blood always, and they also have, they can random up to blood 3. Gygjas are expensive, once again, expensive and inefficient blood hunters, but they can be powerful blood hunters. So you will build up quite a bit of blood playing Nifflheim, and you should. Blood is one of the major things the nation has going for it. You want a little bit of order because you want income, and you want recruitment points to an extent. Yotan skin shifters require recruitment points. That said, you're always going to be gold locked. You want income more than anything. I took Sloth 3 because you absolutely do not need resources as Nifflheim. You just don't. You have troops that cost resources, but they're bad. The troops that you want to recruit are the ones that don't cost much by way of resources. Skin shifters, Yotan Hurlers, to a certain extent Yotan Javelinists, but mainly those two. And of course, of your mages, the only ones that cost resources are Nifflheim, and you're not exactly going to be spamming those. So resources are really irrelevant to you as Nifflheim. Tanking Sloth 3 is probably one of the first things you do. Cold 3, obviously, you start at Cold 3, you stay at Cold 3. Cold 3 is very important to you. And it doesn't affect any of your troops because all your giants have cold resistance and so can move they have snow move, so they can move through snow with no problem, which your enemies may not be able to do. So yeah, Growth 3, Magic 3, Cold 3, those are all basically mandatory. Beyond that, I took the Sloth 3 just to pay for the Bless and the other scales, and then I ended up with Order 1, and I didn't have to take any Misfortune, which I thought was pretty good. That said, as I was saying, you may want to take Fire Resistance in your Bless just to make your Nifflheim less counterable. That's perfectly valid. If you're going to do that, the Irminsul is not the best chassis. You would probably want one of the other immobile chassis. I think the Idol of Men is the one that starts off with Nature and Fire, and so that would probably be a decent one to take if you wanted to do a Fire Resistance and Regeneration Bless. You will have to drop some more scales. Probably you just tank Misfortune at that point. Take Misfortune 2 or something, and then you may be able to afford, I don't know, another point of Dominion or a couple more magic paths or something. But in any case, I'm being a little bit scattered about this, but to wrap up what I'm saying about the mages, mage-wise, you have all the sorcery paths in quite useful amounts. You're going to be recruiting a lot of Gygjas because they're your only non-slow-to-recruit mage. You're also going to be recruiting a number of Yotan Skratti. Skratti are not capital only. They can be recruited anywhere, but they are slow to recruit. They're very powerful thugs. As I said, you need them to make your turbocommunions work most efficiently. And you can raid and fight with them extremely effectively. On top of that, they can also summon Frost Fiends if you want to do that, and they can random Blood 3 a lot more easily than Gygjas can, so you may want them for high-level blood summons like Heliophagi and such. Maybe a little bit easier to get up to that with them. In the late game, Nifflheim is going to rely very heavily on blood. You've got a lot of blood. I mean, all of your mages, except for Niefelheim, both of these guys have pretty heavy blood. You're going to be blood hunting a lot, you're going to build up a lot of slaves, and you're going to cast some of the high-level blood summons are important to you, vampires are important to you. If you can get a blood to death to Gygjas, which is not too hard, you should be able to get into vampires in a pretty big way. You do lack native death 4, which means it's hard for you to forge the death boosters. So, because you can't get up to the skull face natively, so you may have to empower, or you may want to take death on a pretender god. But in any case, while limited, your mage core is potent. There is another very interesting thing about the Yotan commanders. They are all sacred. Every single commander that Nifflheim has is sacred. All of the Yotan commanders, right down to the scouts. And this is funny because what it means is you can actually gear a Yotan scout as a thug. If you've taken a regeneration bless, he'll regenerate 4 hit points around. He's got good combat stats. If you took a regeneration bless plus some other minor, perhaps, I don't know, fire resistance, attack skill, defense skill, whatever, you could take a Yotan scout, give him a shroud to make him, blessed, and then give him a frost brand or a bottle of living water or something, any other item, and he can raid provinces very, very cheaply. Much more cheaply than Yotan Skratti can. And he's only 1 rec point, so if you have the gems to gear them, you can churn out 2 of these guys from a fort per turn, give them some basic gear, and send them off to attack provinces. Is it an efficient use of gems? Well, not sure, but it can be a very interesting tactic, especially because they are naturally stealthy. Now, Yotan Skratti in wolf form are also naturally stealthy, but, you know, it kind of depends on how much you value your gold at that point in the game. I wouldn't do the same thing with Yotan Hurlers, even though they do have better combat stats, just because they're not stealthy, and so there doesn't seem to be much point in it. If I was going to do that, I would probably use Skratti, just because Skratti are a lot less likely to die. Now, in terms of troops, as I've alluded to, most Yotan troops are garbage. That's because they're size 4, so you only get 1 per square. So they end up fighting 3 humans, and they're not good enough to fight 3 humans. A Yotan Spearman, which is kind of your standard troop, costs 30 gold, so he costs the same as 3 human soldiers. Stat-wise, he's actually very similar to human soldiers. He's a lot like independent heavy infantry. The difference is hit points 30 and strength 20. Strength 20 is nice, don't get me wrong. This guy can often, I want to say usually actually, can usually one-shot human infantry with his spear. But that said, he only has attack skill 10, so he's not going to actually hit all that often. He doesn't do enough damage to not be blocked by the combination of shield and body prot, and he's going to take a lot of damage because he's going to be suffering a harassed penalty to his defense skill every single round, because he's going to be taking 2 or 3 or 4 or 6 attacks, since there's no one else in his square to split the attacks up with. So your Yotan units will get ground down really quickly against just massed enemy chaff. They're bad chaff, and chaff is the main job that troops do in, past like turn 12. Yotan Javelinists are a little bit better because they have the javelins, and the javelins do a ton of damage. So if you mass up a few of these guys, you can throw javelins at people. That's fine. If I was going to recruit one of these guys, I would recruit the Javelinists. Yotan Hurlers are a very interesting specialty unit, not because they're good in combat, they're bad in combat, but because they have a siege bonus which gives them a total siege strength of 9, which means you're paying less, about 3 point something very small. I can't do math right now. You're paying about 3 gold per siege strength, which is very good value. Yotan Hurlers can break down walls very quickly, and that's the main use for them. You will recruit a bunch of these guys for use in breaking down walls. Your other troops, these are more elite versions of these troops, essentially. The Yotan Huskarl has an axe and higher prot. The Yotan Huskarl with a spear has, once again, higher prot. And then the Yotan Herdman has better stats and higher prot, and a broadsword, which hits harder, has a higher attack value. I personally don't think these guys are really worth it. Like, they're tougher, yes, but they don't solve the basic problem, which is that hard-hitting human infantry will chop them up. And human units take buffs a lot better than giants do, because they are packed closer together, and so the buffs affect them more. So basically, of all of these units, you recruit these for siege chaff, you sometimes recruit these for fighting. All the rest of them, you only recruit if you have spare money sitting around, and you need chaff. And in that case, I would probably lean towards recruiting like these guys, because they're the slowest to die. Or you can go the other route, you can recruit cheap Yotan Militia and just let them die. And they will die because their skills are garbage, but they have 30 hit points, so if you just want meat, Yotan Militia are your meat. The troops that you recruit to actually do fighting are Yotan Skin Shifters because, as I pointed out, they shift into wolves, and they regenerate, so they're actually tougher than any of the others, just because they regenerate. And then you will deploy Niffle Giants. You don't want to recruit too many of them because they cost the fucking earth. Niffle Giants cost more than many other nations' mages do. And they're size 5, they have that weakness. In Cold 3, they perform quite well, unless specifically countered, but specifically countering them is still pretty easy. Outside of Cold 3, they underperform dramatically for their cost. But in Cold 3, mainly you have a few of these guys around because the Chill Aura in Cold 3 is immensely powerful, and it will freeze enemy units and give your troops the edge that they need to actually fight, by virtue of their enemies being frozen so they can hit them with their giant axes. So Skin Shifters are your main actual fighting force, Niffle Giants are your specialty support units, Yotan Hurlers are your wall breakers, and beyond that, you use mages. You do not recruit many troops as Niefelheim. in the expansion phase, as I said, you're going to have these small groups of Neefle Giants plus chaff and or skin shifters wandering around. Like, this army is overkill. This group can take pretty much any conceivable independent except a throne. This army is much more like what I would think of in typical expansion parties. The other one is so large just because I fucked up my timing and didn't have a commander here on the right turn. So, you know, sometimes that happens to you. The one thing that you will notice in your early expansion following this strategy is that your expansion will outrun your income. You'll find yourself spending so much money recruiting Yotan Skin Shifters and Neefle Giants, who are, as I mentioned, expensive as hell, that you actually can't afford to put province defense in a lot of your provinces. So you may notice a lot of these provinces still have 1 or 2 points of province defense in them, just because when I took them, I literally could not afford to put 6 points in them. That's also why I have very few mages right now. But what you'll see is, in the early game, in the very early game, year 0, you will lag behind in research, you'll lag behind in forts, but you will expand very rapidly in territory. And then come the end of year 0, you will be laying down forts in a big way, your income will be large, and you will rapidly catch up in those metrics to the other people around you, unless you're embroiled in a war that you're losing, in which case, sucks to be you. Now, as you move into the mid-game, as Nifflheim, your primary goal is enchantment. After that, you want thaumaturgy and blood to make sure that you can form your turbocommunions. And then you kind of branch out a lot. Construction is very good for you. You need construction 4 to kick your blood economy into overdrive. Alteration is very good for you because you have a lot of nature access, so you can throw down wooden warriors easily. You can cast some of the water spells. You can cast Battle Fortune on your troops, which is a fantastic little buff spell. Soul Vortex is a great super combatant spell for your Niffle Jarls. Darkness is an excellent army buff for you because a lot of your army is just going to be straight skeleton spam. Horde of skeletons. Your basic combat tactic is a whole bunch of Gygjas with 2 Yotan Skrattis backing them up, and they cast Horde of Skeletons 1,000,000 times and drown your enemy in a tidal wave of the undead. That tactic will carry you through a lot of early battles. Now, of course, the enemy will start deploying counter Skeleспam strategies, but the beautiful thing is, the strategies that counter Skeleспam often do not counter giants, and the strategies that counter giants sometimes don't counter Skeleспam effectively. For example, let me continue to use Ulm, because Ulm is, in my opinion, the example of a nation that just straight up beats Niefelheim. Ulmish troops come in large numbers, they're cheap, they hit very hard, they have high attack density, so they carve through giants incredibly quickly. That said, Ulmish troops lose to massed Skeleспam because skeletons, while they do get killed very quickly by Ulmish infantry, skeletons also strike back. Skeletons come in high density themselves. They score damage, and Ulmish troops are very lightly armored, so the skeletons will wear them down. And you can afford to throw away 500 skeletons, while the Ulm player cannot afford to throw away 500 axe warriors, necessarily, because that, even though they're cheap, that's still 5,000 gold. So, essentially, your Gygjas, your magic, will bolster your national weaknesses very, very powerfully, especially if you mix a few Neefle Giants in with that Skeleспam. Skeletons don't care about the cold, but enemy human units will be frozen by it. And that will enable your skeletons to hit them more. And then, as I said, as you branch out, there are a ton of options. Death, Nature, Blood, Astral, this is an incredibly flexible combination of paths. Almost any school of research will give you something. Ironically, one of the least useful schools to use is probably Conjuration. At least early on, pardon my stuttering there. Later on, you will definitely want some of the higher level death summons and some of the nature summons, but early on, Conjuration doesn't give you a ton. You do have some cool national summons here. Sloth of Bears is not very cool, it just summons bears, which are not super impressive. Yotan Draugr are actually quite cool. Yotan Draugs are, they're sort of like, well, you know the mechanism that elementals have where they shrink when they're damaged? Yotan Draugr are wights, essentially, that have that mechanism. So when they take damage, they shrink to a size smaller. They have the cold aura that your Neefle Giants do, and they're just very tough and hard to kill. They're expensive. They're 5 death gems each. Can sometimes be worthwhile, especially if you have a whole bunch of death gems going begging. Yotan Wolves, also quite powerful. Wolves are sacred. They take your regeneration bless. They have fear. And if I recall correctly, they also have Berserker. So this can be a very nice early summon as well. Those are both at level 4. Even so, Conjuration would not be my first target as Nifflheim. Other national spells. Nifflheim has a national blood spell, Illwinter. When you cast Illwinter, the whole world goes to cold 3. This is amazing for you because you function really well in cold 3 and most other nations do not. It causes unrest to increase worldwide. It also causes random independent attacks of Yotan Wolves and occasionally giants on enemy provinces all over the world. Illwinter is incredibly powerful because it hurts the enemy quite badly all over the world, and it doesn't hurt you at all. In fact, it makes you much stronger. So as soon as you can put Illwinter up, I would. It's fairly easy to pull up. Your Yotan Skratti can cast Illwinter with very little boosting. If you get a Water 3 random, they can just straight up cast it with a little bit of blood empowerment. Otherwise, you may need a water bracelet or something, but that's not a problem for you. I mean, you have water, you're going to have water income, because your Skratti can site search for it. In fact, you're probably going to have a lot of gem income in general, because you can site search for up to level 2 or 3 in all of the sorcery paths plus water very easily. Your native gem income is quite good, actually. You start with decent water income, and then 4 and 2 death, and then just as you're rampaging around, you will find, in my experience, you'll tend to find quite a few level 0 water sites, and other sites as well. So I've got a lava lake there, got a lake of mists, a starlit pond. Over here I have a library, so I can actually recruit sages from this province, which is radical. I will definitely build a fort here. Yeah, so early on, Nifflheim is going to explode outwards, and you're going to have very rapid expansion. This can be helped with an Awake Expander. That said, I don't really like the Awake Expanders that Nifflheim has access to. They don't have access to a strong one. I'm losing my mind. Where did Nifflheim go? There they are. If we look at your selection of chassis, you've got the Lenormor. Lenormor's not bad, but it won't give you a regeneration bless, and you really, really want that regeneration bless. The regeneration bless is what enables your turbocommunions, it helps your supercombatants, it helps your troops. It's really important. So it's important to have nature. And in terms of expanders with nature, especially after the nerf from the patch that nerfed Awake Expanding monsters, your options aren't great. You have nature dragons, but nature dragons cost 260 points. They're just too expensive, in my opinion. You have the Son of Fenrir, and the Son of Fenrir is fairly cheap. You could take the Son of Fenrir with a regeneration bless and still have some scales. You want growth 3 because you are, of course, a blood nation. You can dump Sloth, you can dump Misfortune. That could give you a little bit of order. This would work fine. You could do this, you could take regeneration. You could even take a minor water bless if you wanted, although most of these are not relevant to you. Chill Aura, you already have. Frost Weapons, don't care. Cold Resistance, already have. Winter's Gift, already have. Swamp Survival, potentially, but it takes a point of nature, and you don't want to buy an 8th point of nature. So probably at this point, I would just kick your Dominion up a little bit, and get 2 more scales, probably Magic. Because Magic, as I said, is very important. So this is a perfectly viable build. I find the Son of Fenrir a little bit fragile. His prot is not good. He does start with Yotan Wolves, which of course take the bless, because they're sacred, so that's nice. But I don't know. Overall, the Son of Fenrir is a little bit risky, just because, as I said, he is kind of fragile. Protection set 13. It goes up to 20 after Berserker, but 20 is not much, especially because his defense skill will at that point be 4. So he will get hit a lot. You can only take light provinces with the Son of Fenrir. That said, he does have fear, and he is stealthy, so you can win some surprising fights with him if you're lucky. Dracolich, I wouldn't. Beyond that, that's pretty much your monster options. Ormur is a perfectly solid expanding monster, but once again, no nature, and you need nature. Bog Mummy, I mean, okay, he's a vampire summoner, basically, but once again, no nature. He is immortal, which is nice, but I still wouldn't. Ghost King, potentially you could give him nature, but it would be expensive as hell. In terms of rainbows. You could take a rainbow, but once again, you're looking for an awake. You want that regeneration bless active right from the start. You could go dormant, because you don't actually need it right at the start. So you could take like a dormant master enchanter. This could work fine. This gives you several hundred more points. You could max these out. You could even probably drop that. Or if you wanted to, you could still take that down there. That gives you 200 points to spend on more paths. So now, on top of your nature, you can say, well, what else do I want? Don't particularly need more bless, but I could take, let me see. What paths do you need that you don't have? I could take some astral and some earth in order to forge crystal items, perhaps? Don't know. You don't really need any of these, I don't feel. I think Nifflheim kind of gets along just fine with what they've got. A little bit of earth wouldn't go amiss, I suppose, and then you could use that to take a fire shock resist bless. That would help you. So this would be fine, and then that still gives you more than 100 points, so, you know, yippee-ki-yay. There you go. Order 3 gives you a little bit extra income. Dominion 5. This is a perfectly solid Niefelheim build. For myself, though, I think probably an immobile is your best bet. Ermine Soul is a good one just for the regeneration. Like I said, the Idol of Men would let you get in that Fire 4 for the Fire Bless. You take him awake, you have to lose a couple of scales here, but you can do that really easily. This would be fine. This would work really well for you. You could then take Major Fire Resist and Superior Morale. That would help counteract the weakness of your super combatants in the later game. And, you know, like I said, you could still take this guy dormant. Expanding without the regeneration bless, not quite as easy, but can still definitely be done. You'd be leaning more on skin shifters because they have regeneration natively and aren't sacred. In terms of your late game strategy, as I think I mentioned before, your late game strategy is going to go very hard blood. You're going to take all this large amount of territory you've gotten in early expansion, you're going to turn it into research points. Turn your income into research points by spamming Gygjas and recruiting a few Yotan Skratti. Hit enchantment 5. Once you've hit enchantment 5, go kill someone. You want to take a turbocommunion, or several turbocommunions actually, you know, split them up, 5 or 6 Gygjas backed up by 2 Yotan Skratti. You give them some blood slaves so they can form the Sabbath, so that your Yotan Skratti can get in there. You roll into somebody's territory and you drown them under skeletons before they have a counter to Skelespam active. Back it up with skin shifters, and potentially a few Niffle giants, bring some Yotan Hurlers to break forts, and roll through someone's territory as fast as possible. Once you've done that and you're moving into the mid-game, now's the point where you start deploying thugs. You start deploying Yotan Skratti as raiders in their werewolf form. You can start deploying Niffle Jarls as super combatants, who can drop down on people and cause some havoc. They can only really get Air 1, which gives them mirror image, but doesn't give them any of the really cool air stuff. You can give them an air gem. You'll have a little bit of air income. You can give them an air gem, the air randoms, and have them cast a mist form on themselves, which is very, very useful in making them much harder to kill. So that's a nice little touch. But once you get into the mid-game there, you research some construction, you research alteration, and you research blood. And as you go into blood, you start summoning the high-level blood creatures. You start summoning vampires. If you really work at it, you can probably be summoning vampires in noticeable amounts before turn 50, which will make you much more dangerous. And that will, of course, ramp your blood income up much more. You put up Illwinter to make everywhere cold so that you can use your Niffle Giants much more effectively. You still won't be recruiting a lot of them just because they cost so much, but even a few mixed into an army, if you can keep them safe, will be a potent force multiplier against living troops. Not against the undead, but against the living troops who don't have cold resistance. They'll be quite effective. The people you need to worry about are people like Ulm, who has cold resistance and high attack density troops. People like Tianxi, who have the Warriors of the Five Elements, who have crazy high attack quality and density. People like Kalem, who have a lot of built-in cold resistance and can hit you with cold, shock, or fire. You know, shock or fire in your case, pretty easily. A lot of other nations you don't have good answers to you, which is kind of the nice thing about playing a giant nation. Like, you're very lopsided. Yes, Some people have easy answers to you. A lot of other people don't. For example, I think Niefelheim versus Hinnom, I would say that matchup favors Nifflheim a lot. Because, A, Niffleheim's giants are stronger. Yotan skin shifters are, I think, better quality than pretty much anything that Hinnom can recruit except for the Dawn Guard and their Rarefight Warrior Sacreds, which they don't recruit a whole lot of. And Yotan Skratti are excellent counter thugs to remove Melkarts and similar Hinnomite thugs that may be coming after you. Also, of course, as I said, you can raid with your sacred Yotan scouts. I don't know why these guys are sacred. I don't understand. I don't understand it. There's no reason for it, but it is. So, you know, enjoy it. You can build shrouds very easily. You can build blood items very easily. You can build some of those, like the Death Astral Crosspath items that almost nobody ever actually gets to use. You can use them because you're one of the few nations that can do that. There's a lot of fun things you can do with Niffleheim. The thing you just have to be careful with is, everything in Niffleheim is super expensive. Everything is super expensive, and everything is kind of fragile in this odd way that giants have in Dominions 5. Giants are weirdly vulnerable because of the size thing, because they come one to a square. In battle, they're just very easy to isolate and kill in a way that you would not expect when you look at, you know, these big, dangerous giants of old. You would not expect them to be, like, dragged down and hamstrung by 3 dudes with axes, but they are. So you have to keep that in mind. Your chaff is not good. Your mages are very powerful, but expensive. Your sacreds are expensive and not very powerful, actually. Your skin shifters are effective, but expensive. You're going to need a lot of money to feed your worm machine, and that means that you're going to have to be very proactive about acquiring territory and keeping enemies from taking your territory from you. Raiding can be disastrous against Niffleheim because they can cripple your ability to continue recruiting your powerful mages and your powerful units and even your siege chaff, because even your siege chaff are expensive. So, food for thought. Niffleheim is a very interesting nation. They're not a nation, oddly enough, that I have a lot of experience with. You'd think this kind of nation would be right up my alley, but I have actually never played Niffleheim in a multiplayer Dominions 5 game. I played them a little bit in Dominions 4, not a whole lot. The changes, the bless changes, I think, actually have mattered less to Niffleheim than to most other nations, just because there is quite clearly one bless they want, which is regeneration, and regeneration costs exactly the same as it always did. It's Nature 7, that's it, that's what it is. The fact that they can get fire resistance from a bless, however, has been a big thing. Like, the fact that I can just take major fire resistance on Niffleheim gives Niffle Giants a lot more of a lease on life, because without that, fire bad, fire very, very bad, they suck at handling it, and it destroys them. But with fire resistance 10, so it actually works out to fire resistance 5, that makes them a lot more durable when you're fighting, you know, Abyssia or Agartha, who has been summoning magma children, or literally anyone using any amount of fire magic at all. Also, fortunately, of course, because fire magic can't be strong, you do have the option of bringing 1 Yotan Skratti and casting Rain, which kind of puts paid to the fire strategies quite efficiently. In any case, thanks for watching. This has been Niffleheim. I like Niffleheim conceptually. Like I said, I've never really used them, and for some reason, I don't know. I just don't feel the urge. They don't rate on my top nations list. They're not among my favorite. They're not as fun as Femoria. They're not as fun as Ulm. I don't know. They're neat, and I'll probably play them at some point, but for some reason they don't spark my fancy the way some of the other nations do. But in any case, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.